All right, hello everyone. My name is Uriel Solis, and I'm going to be sharing with you my presentation on drug abuse. So, what I decided to do for my presentation is draw a couple of pictures depicting a situation where someone could find themselves in and how it could ultimately lead to drug abuse. So, first and foremost, I want to define what a drug is. So, according to the book, in a social problems approach, a drug is any habit-forming substance that directly affects the brain and the nervous system. The book describes a drug as a chemical that affects moods, it affects perceptions, it affects body functions, and consciousness. This chemical has a potential of misuse, can be harmful to oneself, and can be harmful to others. So, with this definition, alcohol falls into the category of a drug. Now, what is drug abuse? According to the book, it's regular or excessive use of a drug when, as defined by a group, the consequences endanger relationships with others, detriment are detrimental to the user's health, or jeopardize society itself. In other words, drug abuse is basically excessive use of a drug that can affect or endanger other people and one's health. So my project will depict a possible scenario of the earliest stages of drug abuse. So here we have our main character. He's going to be the one in red, and he's basically walking up to his friends. And here we see one of his friends calling him over, inviting him to smoke with him. This is where he's a bit startled because he's never smoked before. And his friends are trying to convince him to smoke a cigarette. Due to the fact that he wants to be part of the group, he decides to ultimately smoke a cigarette. And as you can see, he's not very comfortable smoking. But one of his friends tries to convince him, saying that cigarettes aren't illegal and saying that everyone else does it. So with the words of his friend and wanting to be part of the group, he decides to ultimately join them and smoke together. This is where he starts to gain confidence and feel comfortable around them and around smoking. So he ultimately decides, why not try alcohol? So he accepts when one of his friends offers him alcohol. And this is where he has his first alcoholic drink. And in this picture, I drew them all enjoying themselves, all of them having fun, laughing, drinking, and smoking. And even though they're having fun now, this is the result of his actions years later. And now he finds himself alone with his addiction. And this is a depiction of drug abuse, where he has excessive use of alcohol, as you can see depicted by the multiple alcohol bottles. And the consequences of his actions leads him to be feeling helpless, depressed, anxious, and even helpless. Here I decided to depict what he's experiencing internally, and I guess you could think of this as his drug addiction even though he has intentions of wanting to quit, the desire of giving up alcohol and cigarettes and other drugs that he may have picked up along the way, ultimately, his drug addiction continues to fight him. And this is him trying to escape, but he finds himself helpless, and his drug abuse or his drug addiction is stronger than him. And then here we see him in a helpless state where maybe yourself or someone you know has experienced, where they claim that it is a dark place that they find themselves in. And I try to depict this situation with him on the ground and trying to color in with a black marker, trying to show his feelings and how he feels like he's in a dark place. And I didn't want to end my series of pictures in a depressing note. So instead, I decided to show a progression to his rehabilitation. And here we see someone approaching him, lending him a hand. This could be maybe a family member, maybe a friend, maybe a group leader or a community member, maybe a therapist or someone who goes to church, lending him a hand and wanting to help. And this is where he starts his journey of rehabilitation or rehab. And this is where he finds himself in a group or a community where he's able to share his experience and he's able to learn from others. Maybe others have experienced the same thing that he has. A lot of the times, people who find themselves in these difficult situations tend to feel like they're on their own. However, this is not the case. And being in a community of people who struggle with the same thing that you do is a perfect way of developing not only skills to be able to overcome the problem, but also to help others, because in a community, people tend to share, or at least in this case, the same problem that he has. And here we see him talking about his experience with drugs. And slowly but surely, with a lot of hard work, he's able to fight off his cravings, fight off his addiction. And this is where I decided to depict that as him fighting and ultimately winning over and overcoming his addiction. Basically fighting himself and winning against the part of him that wants to continue to drink, continue to abuse drugs. This is where he ultimately beats and overcomes. And for this last picture, I decided to have a happy ending and show him celebrating his victory over his drug addiction. And a lot of times people tend to think that because they're at rock bottom, there's nowhere else to go, and they sometimes feel helpless. However, when you're at rock bottom, sometimes you have to realize that even though you're at rock bottom, the only way to go is up. And this is something that I think should always be remembered with people who are struggling with these kinds of problems, these kind of addictions. I wanted to also define what a drug addiction is according to the book. The book uses the word intense craving for a drug that develops after a period of dependency from heavy use. Craving is probably one of the closest synonyms, I guess, from being able to define what a drug addiction is. feeling like you have to depend on whether it's alcohol or any other drug. The word craving really helps define what a drug addiction is. However, as we can see in my depiction, thanks to the rehabilitation program that he goes through, he's able to defeat his intense cravings and he's able to overcome. So my project depicts more closely to the sociological theory of drug abuse, and the theory is known as differential association. The theory asserts that people will learn and take on the drug use norms of small groups that they associate with. I was able to depict this in our first picture, or one of our first pictures, where he finds himself wanting to be part of the group and being influenced by what the group finds as normal. Again, differential association, the theory asserts that people will learn and take on the drug use norms of small groups they associate with. These groups include family, the neighborhood, peer groups, etc. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the reasons why people often decide to take up drinking and take up other types of drugs. And the book lists a couple of reasons why someone would want to resort to drinking. And the book says people often drink to temporarily get rid of unwanted emotions, such as loneliness, anxiety, depression, feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, guilt, and resentment. A few of these I depicted were loneliness, where he didn't want to feel lonely. Our main character didn't want to feel lonely, so he decided to join with a group and to drink. However, once he finds himself all alone, as I depicted here, he decides to continuously drink his emotions away. As you can see from the multiple empty bottles that he has around him, he decides to, like the book says, temporarily get rid of unwanted emotions. This is where he wants to get rid of loneliness. He also wants to get rid of the feeling of depression. And this is something that happens very often with people who find themselves in addiction, where they find themselves experiencing a negative emotion. And because of that negative emotion, they resort to their drug of choice. Right here, it's depicted as alcohol. And because he feels lonely or helpless or even depressed, and he doesn't want to feel that way, he decides to continue to drink. And it's a vicious cycle, because once the feeling, or I guess the temporary, since the book says he temporarily wants to get rid of his emotions, unwanted emotions, once they come back, he decides to continue to drink to get rid of those emotions, and he finds himself doing it over and over again. Some people might even feel guilty when they continuously indulge in drugs. And because they don't want to feel guilty, they continue with drugs, and that feeling later comes back. And because they feel guilty from taking the drugs, they decide to take more just not to feel guilty again. And it's a vicious cycle that they continue to go by. However, it's not always helpless because, as I depicted in this picture, there are plenty of solutions and rehabilitation programs that can help with being able to overcome said addictions and overcome drug abuse to ultimately reach their goals and to no longer have the cravings that they once had and finding real satisfaction in the things that matter in life. So that is my presentation. I hope you enjoyed my very limited artistic skills. Thank you so much, and that's it.